The Kenny Brown Performance Front Grip Kit for 2011 to 2014 Mustangs benefits Mustangs in three major ways. It raises the front roll center, which is a help on lowered Mustangs, adds anti-dive geometry for less front nose droop during braking, and cuts 22 pounds off the already nose-heavy Mustang. The Kenny Brown Front Grip Kit is a complete handling solution that includes control arms, a K-member, and bump steer tie rod ends. All the necessary hardware is included, and a lot of the factory fasteners are reused during installation. The control arms feature extended length ball joints, gussets for strength, and polyurethane bushings. The K-member features provisions for the factory steering rack. Versions are available for 2010 and earlier S197 Mustangs with hydraulic power steering, and 2011 and up models with electric assisted steering. Installation is deceptively easy. We're going to show you how to do it over a weekend in your driveway. First, we used our jacking rails to raise the car up. We supported the car securely on jack stands and put the wheels under the car for added safety. The engine mounts rest on the K-member, so we used an engine support beam attached to the strut towers and 2-inch ratchet straps to hang the engine while we removed the factory K-member. We used a 2-jaw tie rod end puller to pop the tie rods out of the spindle. Then we removed the ball joint clevis pinch bolt. To gain access to all the fasteners underneath, remove the access panels and the Z-brace between the radiator support and the K-member. Since this 2012 car had electrically assisted power steering, we unplugged the connectors from the steering rack. Then, we removed the bolt and separated the steering shaft. With a board and floor jack supporting the factory K-member and steering rack, remove the bolts and nuts securing the K-member to the chassis, and carefully lower the assembly. Having the K-member on a floor jack makes it easy to roll in and out from under the car. Remove the 3 steering rack bolts. The bolts have thread locker on them, so an impact wrench makes this job easier. Remove the fasteners from the rear control arm mounts and save them for later. Use the supplied grease to lubricate the polyurethane bushings. Then, install the control arms to the K-member using the supplied bolts at the front and the factory fasteners at the rear. Torque all the bolts to 110 pound-feet. Use the supplied bolts to install the steering rack to the Kenny Brown K-member. The bolt with the sleeve belongs in the rear location. Torque all the bolts to 85 pound-feet. Roll the new assembly back under the car and jack it up into position, being careful to align the bolts through the lugs in the Kenny Brown K-member and the bolts at the rear. Snug, but don't torque the nuts and bolts just yet. Install the engine mounts by sliding the bolt down into the engine mount bracket, through the mount, and secure it with the supplied nuts. Don't tighten these yet. With the engine mounts loosely installed, torque the front K-member nuts to 90 pound-feet and the back bolts to 65 pound-feet. Release the tension on the toe straps holding the engine and let the engine rest on the mounts. torque the engine mount bolts to 45 pound-feet. Slide the ball joints into the spindles and use a wrench to align the notch in the ball joint stud with the pinch bolt hole. Torque the ball joint pinch bolt to 76 pound-feet. Next, reinstall the steering shaft bolt. To correct for bump steer with the revised front suspension geometry, install the Kenny Brown bump steer tie rod ends on the factory tie rods. To keep our toe setting in the ballpark, we didn't move the jam nuts. Insert the tie rods into the spindles and torque the nut to 35 pound-feet. Lubricate the ball joints and tie rod ends with a grease gun. Reconnect the steering rack electrical plugs. Finally, reinstall the factory Z-brace and replace the underbody panels. All that's left is to head to the alignment shop and you're done.